All right, folks, welcome back. This is Sheepdog Smokey, and we're looking at something here that we've seen before, and we'll likely see the same response from Mexico and from American liberals as we've seen every time. Apparently, the mother of all migrants' caravans is forming up in Honduras, coming from the Interior Secretary. A massive cohort of prospective migrants, dubbed the Mother of All Caravans, is forming in Honduras, the Federal Interior Secretary said today. We are aware that a new caravan is forming in Honduras that they're calling the Mother of All Caravans, which could be made up of more than 20,000 people, Olga Sanchez Cordero said. She didn't offer any details about when the caravan might leave Honduras to start the journey towards Mexico and on to the United States southern border. The Interior Secretary told reporters that migration, and specifically the formation of the huge caravan, was a central issue in talks she held yesterday with United States Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen. Sanchez and said that Nielsen told her the U.S. authorities returned at least 76,000 migrants to their countries of origin in February and expect to deport more than 90,000 this month and a total of 900,000 by the end of the year. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, said in a statement that Nielsen and Sanchez discussed ways the U.S. and Mexico can work together to address irregular migration and the record levels of illegal entries at the U.S. southern border. Thousands of migrants fleeing poverty and violence in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador have entered Mexico at the southern border since late last year as a part of several large caravans. Despite the federal government issuing more than 10,000 humanitarian visas that allow migrants to live and work in Mexico for up to 12 months, most caravan members have chosen to travel to the United States border to seek asylum. You do not have to come to the border. Go to an embassy, go to a consulate. We have one in Guatemala. We have one in El Salvador. We have one in Honduras. We have many places in Mexico. You can come to the approved border crossing and tell them you're there to seek asylum. If you enter the country illegally first, asylum is not a Wizarding World incantation that magically makes your entry into the country legal, and it never should be. Yet another migrant caravan made up of around 2,500 Central Americans and Cubans is currently traveling through Chiapas after leaving Tapachula last weekend. Caravan members walk long distances through Mexico in often hot conditions, but also try to hitch rides to reach towns on the well-trodden migrant route more quickly. Sanchez said today that there is ample evidence that criminal groups are transporting migrants from Tapachula to the northern border in trucks and charging each person thousands of dollars for the service. Imagine the size, the dimension of this migration flow, which is sometimes human trafficking by organized crime. The business of this trafficking is several $billion, she said. Each migrant represents between $2,000 and $6,000 US dollars for them, Sanchez added. The Interior Secretary said that authorities will seek to better patrol the entire 1,020-kilometer stretch of the southern border in order to contain flows of people entering Mexico illegally. She pointed out that there are 370 illegal entry points and just 12 official zones. However, Sanchez said there won't be any move to militarize the border. Instead, migration checkpoints manned by federal police and civil protection personnel will set up on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec to halt migrants who entered Mexico illegally. We have to make a response better, or because there cannot continue to be hundreds of thousands of migrants passing through Mexico and arriving at the northern border, Sanchez said. She added that as a part of the strategy to curb migration, the government will no longer issue long-term humanitarian visas. Ireneo Mujica, a member of a migrant advocacy group that accompanies migrants as they travel through Mexico, said Mexico had stopped granting humanitarian visas to comply with the expectations of United States President Donald Trump. I seriously doubt that, because she quite literally said why they're doing that. However, Sanchez said Mexico itself is struggling to cope with so many migrants currently in the country, pointing out that there is an overwhelming number of asylum seekers in shelters in northern border cities due to the United States government's introduction of a metering system that limits the number of asylum seekers or asylum requests immigration authorities will hear on a daily basis, migrants face long waits in border cities, many of which have high rates of violent crime. Don't go there. Even after they have filed their claim for asylum, there's no guarantee that the migrants will be allowed to wait in the U.S. for the cases to be heard at immigration courts. Yes, there is no guarantee because so many don't return to the hearing, as was previously the case, due to the introduction and subsequent expansion of the so-called Remain in Mexico plan. Well, it's not so-called, it is the plan, because we know that the vast majority of them vanish into the fields and greens, never showing up for court. We don't know about them until they're later picked up for another crime, like DUI or murder, which a lot of them are convicted of. The Secretariat of Foreign Affairs said earlier this month that the Mexican government doesn't agree with this unilateral measure implemented by United States authorities, but continues to receive people anyway for humanitarian reasons. You don't have to agree with us, Mexico, just as we don't have to agree with you. I don't agree with a policy that says our southern border is being invaded regularly and horribly massive numbers of people doing it, but we're not going to protect it with the one force that could do the job. Mexico and the United States agreed in December to cooperate on a U.S. $35.6 billion development plan in southern Mexico and Central America to curb migration, but critics pointed out that most of the U.S. funding is not new, as it will be allocated from existing aid programs. We don't owe the country of Mexico a cent for their southern border. We don't owe them one red cent in aid in any way, shape, form, or fashion. We are a generous nation and we do grant aid, but it's our decision where that aid goes. Secretary Nielsen traveled to Tegucigalpa, Honduras today to meet with officials from that country, as well as Guatemala and El Salvador. The DHS said Nielsen and Northern Triangle security ministers have been working on a first-of-its-kind memorandum of cooperation, or regional compact, that focuses on stemming the migration crisis at its source, including preventing the formation of new migrant caravans that set out to reach the United States. Now, of course, liberals are just up in arms about this. We should just open our borders to any and everyone that comes and not even ask them who they are, so that we get people like Zarate who killed Kate Steinle. We get people who kill police officers like Corporal Singh. We get monsters like the idiot who laughed in court saying he wanted to kill every cop in the country. We get people who are deported multiple times, many of them in the double digits on their deportations, who just keep coming back and keep committing crimes. There was an illegal alien who drove drunk and killed someone very near my home, and I'm nowhere near the border. So they get to the border. Liberals demand catch and release. So, yeah, we catch them at our border. We don't turn them around. We let them continue going, and we hand them a note that says, "Oh, please show up here so we can deport you." They never do. They make their way as far into the country as possible, hoping to fade away. But they eventually just revert to whatever the norm is in their country, which is driving like an idiot, if you've seen Mexican traffic, or which is more and more often worse crime than that. When they're caught, the Democrats demand that ICE not be told an illegal alien is in custody for a further crime. We're told that they all have a spark of divinity and they're just dreamers coming here for a better life. But we have thugs like MS-13 in New York City stabbing people hundreds of times, while AOC defends open borders and just demands that we not even question her. Now this right here, honestly, were I in any part of the Mexican government, I would be telling them, just as I advocate here in the U.S., it has to stop. The southern border must not be a sieve, must not be as porous as toilet paper. We must close the border except for authorized crossings, and we must control those carefully. Yes, there will be people who fly in and overstay a visa. Those people need to be found and deported and put on a list of people not to allow back in the country, so that if they do show up at customs again, they're told, "I'm sorry, no, you may not walk through this door. You will be boarding the next plane back to your home country." We also need to monitor other means. Cargo ships, I know. Yes, there are people who say that most drugs come in through authorized border crossings. What they don't say is it's most of the drugs we find come in at authorized border crossings. This would be like saying that 9 out of 10 burglaries in my home happened because they came in the front door when it was unlocked. But you don't report that you were burgled of more items in that one other burglary that you actually know happened, which suggests that more burglaries happened where they didn't come in through the front door. Criminals don't like to come to the front door. They never will. They come in through windows. Those coming here to perpetrate crimes, the MS-13s of the world and so on, the terrorists that we know we've caught at the southern border, they sneak in not at authorized border crossings. They come in the dead of night, and they're here for horrible reasons. And for that reason, I support what was said earlier just as a report I heard, that we are looking at possibly closing the southern border. And I agree with it. We need to close it for long enough that all of these illegal aliens go home. We tell them, as sternly as possible, but not meanly, that they may apply for asylum in their own home country. They may apply for asylum at any United States embassy or consulate. They should not come here, enter illegally, and then say, asylum, asylum, as if it's a magical spell. We need to tell them that when the border is reopened, they may come to an authorized border crossing, and they may present themselves and request to come into our country. Every other country on the planet does this. The Pope decries walls as immoral while living behind one, and some of the most strict entry rules on the planet for his tiny little country of Vatican City. Mexico has some of the sternest and strictest immigration rules on the planet, yet we're told ours are immoral. It's a ploy. It's a smokescreen, and it always has been and will be. The Democrats know that they must flood us with as many unskilled workers as possible to drive down labor costs and put all of us out of work. Construction, farming, car washes, housekeeping, babysitting, dog walking, a lot of things that are done by our unskilled workers, a lot of things that are done by our children go to illegal immigrants because those people can be paid under the table and you're not taxed. You also don't have to pay them the federal minimum wage. While they cry about worker salaries, while they cry about minimum wage needs to be $15, while they rant that a company that can barely afford the $7.25 it is now, when they're told you have to pay more than double that, they automate or go out of business because they can't afford it. Meanwhile, they encourage these illegal aliens to come into the country, steal identities, and work illegally for less than minimum wage, and then they demand that they be given the right to vote, as if they're going to vote for anyone but the people who said, yes, you can break our laws and we won't do anything. We're at a breaking point. If you have listened to any of the Customs and Border Patrol reports or ICE reports, we are seeing more illegal entries than ever before. And it's because of the Democrats' rhetoric, which is broadcast worldwide, that enforcing our laws is evil. We even have Kamala Harris today saying that she supposedly was taught that you don't whine about a problem, you work to fix it. Yet she whines about this problem and whines about the fact that we are enforcing United States law, while she sits in an office that is literally responsible for passing new laws. Senator Harris, put your money where your mouth is. Actually introduce a bill to decriminalize criminal activity. Introduce a bill to open our borders to the world. See how far it gets in the Senate. See how fast it's vetoed. See how fast Blexit and Jexodus and the rest of the walkaway numbers triple. See how fast your own state's constituents demand you be removed from office because you literally put on paper that illegal immigrants, criminal illegal aliens, are more valuable to you than your own constituency. But I've talked about this long enough. It's time for your turn. Keep the comments classy and civil. Make sure that you are debating, not arguing, because we don't learn from arguments, we learn from debate. There will be a link to this article as well as a link in the description to an email address that you can send content requests to, contact@sheepdogsmoky.com. If I choose yours, I will offer you a free pocket constitution, a document I believe everyone should have on them as regularly as possible. I have one near me pretty much 24/7. It's in my pocket at work. I have another in my desk if I don't wear that jacket. I have one in my car. I have about 300 sitting about 20 feet to my left. You can find me here on Twitter. I don't use the others. You may find what you think is me, and it probably doesn't see activity but once every 2 years when I get something from someone and I tell them, sorry, I don't use this. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to the video. That way you stay up to date. I am still working on the plans for a United States history series. When I'm not responding to news, I'm actually talking about the history of this country, starting with the Jamestown colony. So make sure you're a subscriber so you stay up to date with all that. Until the next time, everyone have a wonderful day.